The communication is so important, and then we get into conflict. So powerful to kind of think about this. We were having this, I guess you would call it kind of morbid conversation on the way down here tonight. I don't know if you guys have ever done this, but like thought about end of life decisions. I mean, those are strange conversations. Like, she said, because I was like, well, you should get married, if I die. You're young, you're beautiful, you don't want to sit by yourself at my funeral. There's just all these reasons why. And I said, but, because our big thing is we grew up in Texas and now we live in Oklahoma, and we lived in Oklahoma almost as long as we used to live in Texas. And so have you ever had the question of, like, where are we going to be buried? And all my family's buried in the same spot down by San Antonio. And Robin's like, I am not getting buried next to your great-grandmother down there. And so I just said, listen, I think I'm in on cremation. And I'm not trying to be weird or ugly, but I said, Robin, for my whole life, I've always wanted a smoking hot body. And that's my chance, right? That's going to happen. And so I said, like, you should get remarried. You're beautiful. You're young. You have your whole life ahead of you. And I said, here's the deal. Like, he can have my truck. You can give him my stuff. The only thing I ask is I've started playing golf, and I really like it. I'm not any good at it, but I like to talk about it and pretend like I am. And I said, so if you don't mind, just don't, like, he can have anything, but don't let him have my golf clubs. And she said, don't worry, he's left-handed. And we might be having conflict on the way home tonight. So that was a really silly way to start that up. When we think about these couples, we always think about these fairy tale romances, or then when you think about Hollywood couples, you think about the exact opposite, and we think about like things going down in flames, literally. So one of the most famous ones was Ava Gardner and Frank Sinatra, and they got into a fight, and Ava Gardner started throwing Frank Sinatra's stuff out on the lawn, and so he started throwing all of her stuff out of the window of the house, and that was before like TikTok and Instagram and all those days when they could record it. But more recently in 1994, a football player named Andre Rison was married to a singer named Lisa Lopes, and they got into a fight, and Rison got so mad that he just walked out of the house, and she got so mad that he walked out of the house that she literally set his house on fire. So I don't know what your conflict looks like, but it's probably not that bad. However, I want to start by letting you know every couple has conflict. Every single couple is going to have conflict. It's friction, it's dissension, it's two people with unique personalities, with different thoughts, different kinds of opinions. And again, Satan hates your marriage, so he's going to make sure you have plenty of opportunities to disagree with your spouse, because if you were exactly the same, there would not need to be two of you, there could just be one of you. And so God has brought you together for a purpose. Satan is trying to separate you from that person and bring disagreement and conflict into your life. But conflict doesn't have to be bad. We can learn how to navigate conflict in a healthy manner that will actually lead us into deeper levels of intimacy. But conflict can be so many things, like how you load the dishwasher. So I just need to know, do knives go up or down in the dishwasher? Okay, where are my up people? And where are my down people? And where are those who are different from their spouse on how those are loaded? Just curious, okay? And then folding the laundry, does the front of the shirt necessarily need to be showing when it's done being folded, or can it just be folded up and put there? Front of the shirt has to be shown, or just fold it and put it in the drawer, or we don't even fold it. We just take it out of the dryer and straight put it on. Squeezing the toothpaste, bottom, middle, doesn't matter. Do I dare go to toilet paper? Over, under, unders, where under, where's over? Who is just glad when there is toilet paper and doesn't have to scream for more? Does it have to come from? And we see there's conflict that can come. One that we think about a lot that comes up, but we don't actually like process it in our brain, is sometimes we have conflict over what was said versus what we heard. And that goes back to learning to be really good communicators and being present in the moment. Now, they tell us that typically there are 5 main areas of conflict in a marriage. And I'll give them to you. They're not on, I don't think they're on your sheet there, but chores, the division of chores in the house, like who's doing what, that can be an area of conflict. In-laws can be an area of conflict. Parenting styles, how we discipline. Do we spank? Do we give time out? When do we spank? When do we give time out? All those things. That can be an area of conflict. Finances, how we spend our money or don't spend our money, especially if one is a saver and one is a spender, or one brings a lot of debt into the marriage and the other one doesn't bring a lot of debt. That can be. And then the fifth one is sex. There can be a lot of conflict about sex. And every single one of these things, chores, in-laws, parenting styles, finances, and sex, if we just learn how to communicate, we can overcome all of these areas of conflict, because none of them are inherently bad. But when I mentioned them, you might have had a negative reaction to them in your mind. Like when I said the word chores, you're like, when I go home, I have to fold more laundry, or I have to do this. When I said in-laws, or when I said parenting styles, there could have been a negative. None of them are intended to be bad, but Satan can use them to bring about conflict in our marriage, because again, he's trying to separate us. So we're going to teach you some tips for how to navigate conflict in your marriage.
That's right. And the first one that's on your sheet is remember who the real enemy is. How many of y'all have ever seen the Hunger Games series? I don't know if you remember that line or not. Thank you for that. But that just hit me so hard when I saw that in the movie. And it's so true for so many areas of our life, but especially our marriage. You know, Jason keeps saying that Satan hates our marriage. John Pokluda, who's a pastor in Texas, wrote a book that's called Your Story Has a Villain. And that can be, we can tweak that a little bit. Your marriage has a villain, a very real villain that comes after you. And a lot of times we think that the villain looks a lot like our spouse, especially when we're really heated, really just in a really bad place, not communicating, not getting along well. And we think this is the problem. This is the problem right here. And we have to stop and remember who the real enemy is.
Yeah, and Robin just alluded to it, but that is found in John chapter 10 and verse 10, where it says, the thief comes only to steal and to kill and to destroy. And we rarely put that in the context of marriage, but he's come to steal from our marriage. He's come to kill our marriage. He's come to destroy, because he knows the fallout that it will have. And this isn't in the notes, but I just want to encourage everybody in the room. Would you please commit to praying for your pastoral staff marriages? Like regularly. Because the fallout, if something were to happen with a pastoral family, no disrespect to anybody in the room, but now it has big implications throughout the whole church, through the body of Christ. So please, Satan especially wants to attack ministry families. He wants to bring division. He wants to steal, kill, and destroy. But the rest of the verse, Jesus says, but I have come that they may have life more abundantly. Aren't you thankful that the enemy comes, but Jesus doesn't stop coming either? He has come to bring us eternal life. And so the day that Robin and I have said I do is the day that we have started playing on the same team. And what do I mean by that? If one of us wins, we both win. But if one of us loses, we both lose. So just like we've been talking about, when in conflict, I have to give my spouse the benefit of the doubt. And I have to assume that they have the best intentions before I jump to conclusions about what they're saying or what they did or what they meant.
I read one time, I think it was a book by Dr. Dobson, and it was actually on parenting, but as we know, there are a lot of things that are parenting nuggets that we can use with our spouse as well.
Just keep that hand right there. Just talk all night.
But he said that we should respond to their intentions and not the outcome. And I could totally see where that was with the kids. Like if they ran past a vase and it fell over, yes, they were running in the house, but did they mean for it to fall over? No. But that's also true in our marriage. There are times where he may have the best of intentions and all I look at is the outcome. And that's a lose-lose situation. I lose in that situation and he loses in that situation. So just remember that. Respond to your spouse's intentions. Stop and think, what were they trying to do in this situation? Not necessarily what the outcome was.
Yeah, that's so good. Let me give you a couple more. They're not written down, but just some thoughts about remembering who the real enemy is. When I remember who the real enemy is, I ask, am I giving my spouse the best part of myself? Sometimes we give our spouse our leftovers. We give our spouse, hey, I got nothing left to offer you, nothing left to give you. But if I know who the real enemy is, then I want to be united. I want our marriage to be the best it can be. So I give Robin the best parts of me. Remembering who the real enemy is reminds me that I need to be most vulnerable with my spouse, completely open and completely transparent. But the converse of that is that sometimes I can dump on my spouse and not mean to do that. And so there has to be a space and a time, and there has to be communication and conversation about that of, hey, there's some hurt, there's some pain, there's some things that I need to talk about. Is this the right moment? Is this the right time? Can we enter into that conversation right now? Remembering who the real enemy is reminds me that I shouldn't treat my spouse poorly simply because I can treat my spouse poorly. Oh, we're married. She's not going to walk out on me. She's not going to leave me. She's not going to do that. I can treat her however I want. No, I treat her better than anybody else because I love her more than anybody else. We're thinking about the priority pyramid again. God first, my spouse second, my kids third, everyone else. And then remembering who the real enemy is causes me to understand his pattern, his tactics, his strategies, which he often repeats. So Satan knows my weak spots. Satan comes after me repeatedly with different disguises. And one of the great things, Robin has so many sayings, but one of her best sayings is, if the devil can't make you bad, he'll make you busy. And so he'll try to make you so busy, you maybe have heard this expression, that you become like two ships passing in the night. And we actually had to have that conversation a couple of weeks ago because there was so much that was going on. Every day that week, I had early morning meetings, like 6:30 in the morning. And then, by 9 o'clock at night, I'm the old man who's like, going to bed, see y'all, I'm out, I'm done for the night. And we'd had no conversation. We'd had no time to connect. We'd had no time to reflect. I'm tired. I'm a little bit more of a morning person. Robin is much more of the night owl. What time do you normally get your workout in, babe?
Around 11 or so. College fit me well. I really enjoyed college, and it just kind of carried over into the rest of it.
And so if we're not intentional with our schedules, the real enemy will try to come in and make us busy so that we're not making time for one another. And so there's this distance that grows between us because he's coming after us, he's using. And we can begin to learn that pattern of, hey, I'm exhausted, and so my temptation is going to be to take it out on my wife because I'm exhausted. Hey, I'm frustrated with things that are going on at work right now, and so my temptation is going to be to be short with my spouse. But if we're aware of those things, and if we remember there is a real enemy, 1 Peter 5 says he is prowling like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. If I remember that, but I also remember that we overcome him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of our testimony. I'm getting super preachy on a Sunday night for you. But when I remember these things, then we can navigate conflict in a healthy manner because we remember who the real enemy is.
That's right. So just real quickly, we're going to have a conversation. We're going to open this gate and walk through it with your spouse. As Jason was talking about, there's a lot of times where Satan knows specifically what your struggles are in your marriage, and he comes at you in different forms, kind of same song, different verse. It's like, oh, we just got through this, and then don't you know it, he's coming at you again. And maybe that's through your kids, maybe that's through in-laws, maybe that's through stress. Sometimes it's our time management that is kind of our Achilles heel, where we are not communicating, not interacting well because neither one of us are managing our time well. So I want you to have a quick conversation just for a couple of minutes and ask each other, what are the most common ways that the enemy attacks us? Because if you can identify those, then you can see what's actually happening and who the real enemy is when your marriage starts to struggle. So take a couple minutes.
All right, you ready to go on, or you need more time? You need 30 seconds? Are you good? I'll give you 30 seconds. 30 seconds. All right, so we're going to keep moving here. We're going to talk about the second way that we can navigate conflict in marriage. And this one is kind of near and dear to my heart. And it's just simply this: learn to see through a different lens. The reason why I say it's near and dear to my heart is in the last 4 months, I've had to start wearing reading glasses. And when I said that, Pastor Chris laughed at me the first time I put them on. But how many know his day is coming? Right? It may not be here yet, but it is coming. And so it's amazing because I had my phone and I have long arms, right? And I could not see it here. And what do your teenagers do is they put it right here to show you what's on their phone. And so I would push their arm away and I was like, I still can't see that. And so in my arm, I'm trying to look. And then all of a sudden I got these, which I lied to everybody because I thought they were only +1. So I was like, I only have to wear +1s. They're 1.25s. And man, it's amazing when I put on these lenses how much better I can see the stuff that's right in front of me. So research tells us that 90% of all marriage spats can be resolved if all the couple does is accurately see the issue from their spouse's perspective. Hold on a second. 90% of all fights in marriage can be resolved if I just accurately see what my spouse is seeing. That's amazing, just learning how to step into Robin's shoes, because as humans, we believe that our perception is reality. It's the basis of a lot of conflict. So what one person perceives as reasonable and normal, another person might see as unreasonable or unusual. Again, here's another one of Robin's phrases. I think it's on the notes for you tonight. Just because it's different doesn't mean it's wrong. Just because it's different doesn't mean it's wrong. We had to learn this in our marriage. Let me try to illustrate this for you. I want to put a picture up on the screen for you that you can see. Let you get a good look at that real quick. So, how many see the bunny rabbit? How many just realized there was a bunny rabbit on the screen? How many see the duck? How many just realized there was a duck on the screen? Let me show you one more. How many see the beautiful young lady with her hair flowing out of the hat? How many are still trying to find that image? And how many see the ugly woman with a big nose, like a gnarly nose that's hanging down there? And you can see her eyes are evil and her chin that's hanging down. Are you still catching it? Now, both are right, because just because it's different doesn't mean that it's wrong. And, this leads us to what Robin and I talk about, and our amazing friends, Darren and Sarah Ballard, who are serving, preaching the gospel to the ends of the earth, and we're so thankful for them. But they have reminded us of this teaching that we heard called The Stories That We Tell Ourselves. I wanted you to talk about that for a second.
Yeah, so saying that your spouse thinking that they're doing something differently and thinking, I can't even believe they're doing something like that. That just blows my mind, is like saying there is a right answer to these pictures and a wrong answer, when in fact there is not. But the important thing is, what if we had put that picture up there and never spoken a word about it? You would have walked away and said, well, that was a picture of an old woman. And then your spouse would have been like, no, that wasn't. Absolutely it was not. But this gave you a chance to kind of explain it. And so this segues into the next part. And this is why we're talking about Darren and Sarah. They sent a podcast one time to me that was called The Stories We Tell Ourselves. How many of y'all have ever heard of anything like that? As human beings, we are natural-born storytellers. We always are filling in the blanks. When we see people that come through the door, and they may be dressed a certain way, or they have a certain look on their face. Like if Jason and I walked in here tonight and we were just like, the story that we would be telling is, number one, we either got in a whopper of a fight on the way here, which we may or may not have. No, just kidding. Or we didn't want to be here, or we were sick, or there was something negative was going on because of the look on my face, because that was the story that y'all would tell yourself about us. Well, we are always, as human beings, telling ourselves stories, and we do this with our spouse as well. And this podcast that we were listening to says that we are actually breaking the commandment that says not to bear false witness against your neighbor. Because when you are creating a story about your spouse, you're creating false witness against them. When we create a story about what our spouse's perspective is, and like, oh my goodness, I can't even believe that they're approaching this issue from that direction because it's so wrong, by the way. It's so wrong. They're just blinded to it. Well, when we start to tell ourselves that story, we start to emotionally react to the story that we tell ourselves. And then we get really annoyed. We could tell ourselves, like, something as simple as, when we first got married, Jason would load the dishwasher wrong. Just gonna say, like, it wasn't, the plates weren't facing the right direction. And so the story I told myself was, well, his mom never told him how to do that correctly. So, until one day he explained to me the reason he puts the plates in going a different direction. I was like, makes total sense, because I had this entire dialogue in my head of how, you poor thing, you've never actually had this explained to you. And so it was my job to tell you how this was supposed to be. But anyway, so we create these stories because we're not communicating with each other about each other's perspective. So when we create the stories, then we create the emotions that go along with those stories, and we get really upset about things. And then once those emotions are in play, our behaviors always follow our emotions. And so we get super upset, and then we start to kind of withdraw from our spouse, and then we start to be mad at them for no reason. It's like, have you ever had a dream about your spouse and then woke up mad at them? Has that ever happened to anybody? Okay, thank you. That has happened to me before, where I woke up and I was just like, you jerk. Like, what in the world?
I was just snoring. That's all I was doing, was snoring.
It was, so I created this story. The dream had created a story, but my emotional response was very real. And it's the same when we don't communicate with each other. That is just a fight waiting to happen, because we are not explaining the story. And so our spouse is filling in the blank. And then it domino effect from there. So here's some examples for you about what that would look like.
A wife says to her husband, oh, okay, we'll go to this. He's probably thinking about other girls. He says, why are we going to bed in the middle of the afternoon? He's probably thinking about other girls. Why would Cinderella's shoe fall off if it fits her perfectly? Literally, I could go all day with these. He's probably thinking about other girls. Why is someone taking a picture of us? He's probably thinking about other girls. If you delete your recycle bin on your PC, where would it go? That's a valid question. He's probably thinking about other girls. I wonder if I've ever bought milk from the same cow twice. Have you ever thought about that? And what if soy milk is regular milk just introducing itself in Spanish? I mean, it's a real thought. Okay, come on. He's probably thinking about other girls. If you mix two types of toothpaste, would all dentists agree, or would two disagree? I think we got one more. He's probably thinking about other girls. If you clean a vacuum cleaner, are you a vacuum cleaner? So healthy conflict leads or creates deeper levels of intimacy. And going off of this, what Robin's talking about, the stories that we tell ourselves. So a wife says to her husband, did you eat the rest of the ice cream? And the husband goes, he's after me about my weight again. She saw me have 2 helpings at dinner, and now she wants to know if I'm the one who ate all the ice cream. No, I didn't eat all the ice cream. And she says, oh, good, I was hoping we could share some of it later while we watched a movie together. He totally misinterpreted the question that she was asking, and he created a new narrative in his mind. And so the more that we learn to say out loud, the more that we have to learn to explain, and the more that we have to bring understanding to the situation. And so when we see our couples through a different lens, what we're really saying, as a couple, when we see each other through different lenses, we're saying, help me to notice the things that I can't see. And I think we got this on the screen for you, but healthy conflict creates deeper intimacy. And this is so important. We're going to talk more about this in a second, but when we got married, I was completely conflict avoidant. Absolutely. Conflict was the worst possible thing that could ever happen in a marriage. If we had a fight, we might as well just fill out the divorce papers. It was so bad and it was so wrong. And it took me the longest time to realize that if we actually just learned how to navigate our way through conflict, it would create deeper levels of intimacy in our marriage. And again, going back to what Pastor Chris said this morning, intimacy doesn't just imply the word sex. It's holistic intimacy. It's relational intimacy. It's intellectual intimacy. It's spiritual intimacy. It's emotional intimacy. And when we're experiencing all these levels of intimacy, then absolutely the physical side of things is going to come as well. I got to study for a little bit out at Focus on the Family in Colorado Springs, and I got to interact with some of their leading psychologists and marriage thinkers, if you will. Greg Smalley is one of them, and he said when there is no conflict in a marriage, it suggests that the emotions of the marriage have been deadened and the heart has been hardened. And he says we can fix a lot of things in marriage. I mean, this is Greg Smalley, one of the leading marriage psychologists and counselors on the planet. And he says we can fix almost anything in a marriage, but when one partner has closed or hardened their hearts, there's literally nothing we can do until they're willing to let their heart open again. And so sometimes we have to have that healthy conflict just to keep our heart open, and we have to remind ourselves that we can make it through difficult things. Did you want to mention or talk about my conflict avoidance?
Well, the story that I told myself when Jason would not engage in arguments with me was that he didn't care enough about the relationship to really bother investing emotionally in it. And he, at the same time, was trying so hard to avoid any type of conflict. And I, simultaneously, was trying to, I was instigating things just to try to get something out of him. And one time, I said to him, I need you to tell me off. I am being so completely irrational and nothing's coming out of you. I know I'm being irrational and you're not doing anything about it. And he was like, I just don't want to fight. And I was like, I don't even know what to do with that. So when we finally had the effective communication of saying, this is the story that tells me. You're telling me that you don't care enough about our relationship to invest yourself emotionally into it. And when he realized that, then he would tell me off if I needed it. So, I'm just kidding.
Very rarely would that happen. Let me give you some keys to healthy conflict tonight. First of all, know when to talk and know when to listen. I was waiting for an amen on that one. But this is so important, knowing when to talk and knowing when to listen. And let me tell you what has been so helpful in our marriage. Robin gives me a context clue. She will say to me, I need to tell you some things, and I don't need you to fix this. I just need you to hear me out. You remember the It's Not About the Nail video? I don't need you to pull the nail out. I just need you to listen to me while I explain that all my sweaters are snagging. And so I would just encourage you as couples, have those context clues. It is so important. And we've even reversed it. There's been times I've come home and I've said, you don't even have to respond to this. You don't have to do anything about it. I just need to get this out of my system. Is it okay if I just vent for a second? And here's what I have found about even saying that and even engaging in the act of getting it out is when we verbalize it, it loses its power. When we keep it stored in, it festers until it boils up like Old Faithful at Yellowstone and explodes, and then it's dangerous and messy and people get hurt. But when I verbalize it, when I speak it out loud, whatever it is has just lost its power in my life. It's lost its ability to control me. It stops living rent-free in my mind because I've had the opportunity to verbalize it. And so Robin will say that to me. I don't need you to fix this. I just need you to listen to me. Because guys, we're fixers. That's what we do. That's what we're supposed to do is, man, I'm going to go hurt somebody. I'm going to go buy duct tape and fix something. I'm going to go make this right. And it's just that, and again, the hand on the shoulder, just need you to listen. Just need to be. And then on the converse of that, hey, I need you to go fix this. Watch out, baby. I'm going for this because now I've been given the green light to take off. So know when to talk and know when to listen. Here's the next one. Cherish your spouse. In healthy conflict, we cherish one another. We can we can have a disagreement without being disagreeable. And to cherish someone is to hold someone dear and to experience great pleasure when you think about them. When I say the words IRS, they give you like a warm, fuzzy feeling in your stomach. But if you were to say your spouse's name, you would have a feeling of cherishing them, recognizing their value. We actually have this statement. You want to say it? I'm going to say it. We have this statement. We're just like giving you guys everything right now today about our marriage. But sometimes we will say this to each other. I love you. I just don't like you right now.
And often that follows, I don't even like me right now. So if I don't like me right now, I don't really like you right now. I just know you're safe, but I'm having a moment.
Yeah.
So.
And here's what the Bible actually says about that. Jesus says you should love your neighbor as you love. You can't love your neighbor if you don't love yourself. And so we have to realize the value that God places upon our lives, and we have to see ourselves the way God sees us. But then we also have to be able to be vulnerable and say, hey, listen, I'm struggling with loving me right now, and so I don't want something to come out on you that's ugly or nasty or whatever. I'm struggling with loving me. And so it's really important. Here's the third key to healthy conflict is create a safe environment. Create a safe environment, a safe space where when there is conflict, it can happen in a safe way. And the question we want to ask ourselves is when we reflect on our marriage, is our marriage more like a playground or more like a battleground? Because those are two totally different atmospheres. In fact, Billy Graham's wife is the one who said, Ruth Graham Bell, she said, a good marriage is the union of two good forgivers. So we got to be great forgivers in a safe space where we know if we're going to mess up, we can forgive. But let me just take this safe environment a step further. I'm not really into it, and I haven't seen a whole lot about it, but I know that there is like the boxing and the MMA and all these fights and these things that take place. And so when these fights take place, they have a ring, they have rules, they have a time limit, they have gloves and equipment that they have to wear. And so I want to ask you tonight, what is your fight environment like? If you're going to have a fight, where's the location? Hopefully it's not in the foyer after church. Hopefully it's not in the restaurant in front of a lot of people, right? Where does the fight take place? What are the rules in place for your fight? Is there someone who can come in like a referee and help? For us, there's like rules in our life, like we don't fight when we're tired and we don't fight when we're hungry. Because the Snickers commercial says you're not yourself when you're hungry, right? And so if you feel that you're being triggered, or you feel that you need some time to calm down, ask your spouse for that. Robin actually talks about that whole concept of going into our brainstem when that conflict happens.
We did a trauma training with our church staff this week, and so I was explaining to them, like, you can tell none of us are blank slates. We do not come to a marriage with just a white sheet of paper like nothing has ever happened to us. There are certain things that trigger us. Based on what has happened to us in the past. And we were explaining this to our staff where somebody may approach you in the church and they say something to you and you can feel yourself. Have you ever heard the term going into your brainstem? Has everybody heard that? And what happens is you go into fight, flight, or freeze. And that means something has happened. Your body, there's this awesome book that's called The Body Keeps the Score, and it's from people who, it's written about people who have experienced trauma, because your body takes you back into that moment and tells you that you are in a dangerous situation, and it engages your fight, your flight, your freeze. And that can happen in your marital conflict too. Maybe there was something that was said, maybe it was the tone in which it was said that reminded you, like your body automatically says, I am not in a safe situation. And so you can feel it. Your heart starts beating really, really quickly. You start breathing really shallow. And you start sweating. In that moment, that's not a time for you to engage in an argument or try to work out conflict with your spouse. That's the time where you need to kind of go off by yourself, take some deep breaths, calm yourself down. You can feel when you come out of your brainstem because your adrenaline like stops pumping at this rate that makes you want to run through a wall. And so that's one of the things that is a rule that you don't engage in an argument. And when we say fight, we don't mean like knock down, drag out. We mean like engaging in conflict, engaging in some type of argument. You should never engage in that when you feel triggered already. That should be one of your rules of engagement, is that I need time. I can feel myself really being triggered. I'm in my brainstem, and I just need time so that I can calm down and we can work through this where I'm using all of my brain and not just my survival skill. Does that make sense? Okay.
This is kind of a silly example, so forgive me. I am a guy, so it is a sports example. But I saw this coach one time, and his team lost a game that they really shouldn't have lost. And it was basically, they didn't show up, they didn't give the effort, they didn't listen to the coaching or anything like that. And they showed the video of in the locker room, and the coach gathered the team together, and he says, I'm not going to speak to you tonight because I'm going to say things that I will regret. I'll talk to you again in the morning. And dismissed his team. And that sent the most powerful message to the team, that he was, first of all, had self-control, but number two, he wanted to process what he was thinking so that he could correctly articulate what was going on. And what if we could learn to do that in our marriage? Now, here's the caveat and here's the caution. What do we tend to do in those moments? We'll get to it later, and we don't get to it later. So that's when we always encourage couples. If you say, we're not going to talk about it right now because I'm in my brainstem, then let's say, hey, I can't talk about this right now. I need some time. Can we get back together in half an hour? Can we talk about this? I remember one time we had a situation that we were trying to navigate through, and it wasn't like, again, a knockdown, drag out, but it was something that we just had disagreement on, and we had to work our way through. And so we set a coffee date in a coffee shop. We both came together at that time. We sat down. We had very civil conversation. We looked each other in the eyes. We heard each other's heart, and the Lord helped us, and we navigated our way through that conflict. Satan wanted that to be something that was always a trigger, something that was continually there, a perpetual problem in our marriage. But the Lord allowed us to get through that in a way that was healthy, and I feel like our marriage is much better as a result of it because we learned how to navigate through that in a healthy way. And almost all conflict, I want to remind you, this can be resolved when we have good communication.
So just take a minute, and I want you to discuss with your spouse, what are our unspoken rules of engagement? And if you don't have them, create them tonight. Just jot down some things. Start to think about this. What are some things, what are some parameters that we have, even if we don't realize we use these rules? What are some parameters that make our conflict productive instead of harmful? So those unspoken rules of engagement. Take a couple minutes.
I'm going to give you about 60 seconds to wrap that up.
One thing that I also forgot to mention that might be helpful in creating parameters, I tend to be a little bit sarcastic when I get upset about things. Does anybody else join me? Like, I can throw some zingers out there. And that, Jason verbalized to me, could be very hurtful. And so when you're trying to work through conflict, sarcasm is not really helpful. Actually, it's not helpful at all. It really has no place in conflict resolution, although it makes you feel really good when you get some good ones in there. You feel better, but your relationship is not necessarily better in the end.
There are times when sarcasm is really funny and good.
But not when we're in conflict.
But not during conflict. Not at all. We have had the best time being with you tonight. Thank you so much for letting us come. Thank you, Pastor Chris and Angie, for hosting a night like this and investing in marriages. We thank your lead pastors for that. Before we get out of the way tonight, I want to say one thing and then I want to pray over you. I just want to express appreciation as a lead pastor myself, and I know that they can't hear me and they don't know, but I want to say thank you to all the children's ministry workers. It's so much easier for us to have a night like this when there are people who are providing amazing ministry. So Pastor Amy, Pastor Titus, I'm probably leaving other people out, but all the team that is doing that, we're so thankful. And we're so thankful for this church. I'm not just a huge fan of Pastor Chris, I'm a huge fan of you guys and the ministry and the work that you're doing, sending missionaries all over the world, investing in kingdom builders, and just the growth that we see. My favorite thing is actually to come to the Ash Wednesday service. We only have service the first Wednesday of every month at Spirit Church in Bartlesville, and this year the first Wednesday of February is Ash Wednesday, so Spirit Church will have their first ever Ash Wednesday service because you guys have an Ash Wednesday service. So thank you for leading the way and being exemplary in everything that you do. Would you take your spouse's hand? I want to pray over you guys before we go. Lord, thank you for this night and this time that we can be together. Thank you for these godly couples who love you, who love your kingdom, and who love one another. Lord, I pray that you would bless them. I pray that you would cause their marriage to thrive and to prosper so that the kingdom would continue to advance and to be grown. I pray that they would be a reflection of the relationship between Christ and his church. And I pray that many people would draw near to the Savior because of the way they see godly marriages all around them. I also pray that you would bless this church. I pray that you would continue to bless Pastor Chris and Angie as they lead. I pray that you would walk with their entire team. We believe the best is yet to come here at Christian Chapel, and we're thankful for who you are. To God be the glory. In Jesus' name, amen.